the rise of digital therapeutics in clinical care.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us for what I'm sure will be an exciting and engaging discussion on the rise of digital therapeutics in clinical care. It's an honor for me to be here with all of you in Malta, but specifically to share the stage with our esteemed panel members, a diverse group of industry leaders ranging from innovators to payers to advisors/pilots. My name is Dr. Gina Itzikowicz. I'm a medical doctor based in Cape Town, South Africa, with a background in pediatrics, biostatistics, and epidemiology. I'm currently working in the AI space, where I lead a team exploring AI-based cancer screening technologies for Africa, and I'm the AI Clinical Implementation Associate for Ordere, which is a non-profit co-headquartered in Johannesburg and Seattle, operating at the intersection of high-tech and global health. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to our panel members and ask you each to introduce yourselves, share a little bit about your background and what brings you to this conversation on digital therapeutics. If I may, I'm going to start with Laura, our rose, amidst the, not the thorns, our rose on the stage. So, Laura, over to you.
Hi. Morning, everyone. Thank you for braving the rain. If you're like me, got very wet on the way over here, but it's fantastic to see such a diverse group of people, both on this panel, but in the audience, to really drive a discussion around digital health and its future. My name's Laura Parker. I'm the head of value-based care at Bupa, who is a multinational insurance and healthcare provider. I'm not a clinician by background, but my background is in health strategy and transformation with a focus on digital healthcare. My main focus at the moment at Bupa is around exploring new models of care that drive better clinical outcomes, enhancing the use of digital technologies to reach new customer groups, and exploring new ways of engaging and managing our provider panels and networks to explore new partnerships and ways of working for better health outcomes.
Thank you, Laura. Sandeep?
Thanks, Gina. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandeep Fulham. I'm a physician entrepreneur, been involved in creating several digital health companies over the last 10 years, primarily focused on improving access to care via technology and services to provide access to care in people's homes. As part of that, we built companies around data collection, analyzing the data, software as a medical device, algorithms, and then most recently building acute hospital home programs, leveraging data, analysis, and services to provide care in the home.
Great, thanks, Sandeep. And then finally, Daniel.
Hi, hello. I am Daniel Young, a co-founder of Digital HealthWorks, and our agency is focused on commercialization strategies for innovative digital health and medical devices. Now, my background, however, is coming from building products. So we built, or recently built a remote patient monitoring platform to monitor COPD patients using a combination of edge computer, AI, and some other algorithms to really look at how we can better manage these patients. And so looking from that, building on that experience, we help companies try to understand what they're getting into from a commercial perspective.
Great, thank you. And I think we all look forward to hearing your insights. Our topic, digital therapeutics, I think we can all agree is significantly vast. So perhaps it's a good idea for me to ground it in a simple definition before we kick off our discussions. Digital therapeutics, in essence, are evidence-based software interventions that are designed to diagnose, treat, and prevent a host of medical conditions. They differ essentially from general health apps in that they typically are validated through clinical trials and they require quite rigid regulatory approvals. Given the vastness of this space, perhaps I could challenge each one of you to briefly distill in one or two lines what you believe to be the essence of digital therapeutics. Deep, perhaps we can start with you.
So thanks for giving us a warning, because I actually shared an article to show how difficult it is to define what this is.
I told you it was a challenge.
So yeah, go on LinkedIn and you'll see the article. But in the way we look at it is a digital therapeutic is clinically validated software that allows care to be delivered to patients wherever they are.
Thank you. Nice and concise. Laura?
I think that's a really interesting point because there is a real misconception around what digital therapeutics are and aren't, particularly with the vast array of app store kind of solutions that we see, particularly in the health and wellness space. But focusing on the kind of more clinically validated areas, it's something from a payer's perspective we see as a really transformational element of healthcare and a potential game changer in terms of being able to improve health outcomes for patients, improve the access to care through its scalable and digital technologies, and also for empowering and engaging individuals to better know and manage their health. And we know that when we do these things together, they can reduce the overall cost of care and make it more feasible to provide more care for more people in a better way.
Thank you. Daniel?
Well, it's going to be hard to top both of you because those are very good definitions. And the article, if you look on LinkedIn, was actually quite good. I read it this morning. Not to dwell on this, but the way that I kind of view digital therapeutics are that really they're clinically validated therapeutic methods that are delivered to a patient digitally. And they are more of a active approach than, say, a passive approach of like a pharmaceutical where a patient will just take it, it does its magic. But a digital therapeutic requires an engagement and a relationship between the patient and the technology in order to affect the positive outcome.
Great, thank you. I love all of those definitions. Thank you. So considering that digital therapeutics have gained significant momentum in recent years, and in a way they're transforming the way that we approach patient care and health outcomes across a significant range of medical conditions. I'd like to ask each of you to share your thoughts on what you believe are the key factors driving this rise of digital therapeutics, and what trends do you see as the most promising opportunities in this space? Who would like to have a go?
I'll go first. And you know, it's a confluence of infrastructure, access to broadband, smartphone penetration, and the ability now to gather an array of data from sensors that are wearable, and I don't know if you've heard this space, nearables, which are now contactless passive monitoring for continuous data. So there's a whole universe of new information that's available that is more real-time and closer to when a patient's care could be impacted by acting in a timely fashion. So, you know, in the past, you'd had to wait for patients to come see you in the clinic, in the doctor's office or hospital. So that opportunity to engage a patient in a timely fashion to influence the outcome, there's a gap in the time. So I think by having these new resources where patients are able to generate data, have that data be captured through a digital means, and then have that be interpreted in software or with a clinician in the loop, allows for these new care models and type of interventions that are not pharmaceutical in nature but are now digital in nature to enable this new process to happen. And studies have proven that if you combine a digital component to a traditional therapy, you are able to achieve better outcomes usually for patients. And a good example of that was almost 20 years ago when a company called WellDoc in the US applied this to diabetes management. And they were the first digital therapy that was actually classified as a prescriptive digital therapy that required a doctor's prescription. Just as if you would go pick up meds from your pharmacy, you literally had to take a doctor's order and get a QR code and download the app after the pharmacist gave you this. So they built this whole process to fit into, and we'll get into this, which was reimbursement and, you know, how do you make sure this was safe. But yeah, those are the kind of confluence of technology, access, and software that allowed this new kind of intervention to take place.
Great, thanks, Sandeep. And you touched on what would you refer to them as neurables? There's an invisibles as I had understood them, and we won't cover that topic today, but absolutely fascinating space. So thank you. Laura, how about you?
I think to build on that point, actually, just the depth and breadth of data that we have through, you know, wearables, medical devices, and what we call as the Internet of Things, but essentially connected devices which capture a more granular level of detail about a patient in their individual setting has really empowered us to better understand how we meet their needs. And the concept, I guess, of digitization of existing, validated, proven therapeutic models is not a new concept. It's something which has been in place or kind of terminology being used since the early 2000s. What is new and the game changer that we're seeing in the market at the moment is largely driven by the power and capabilities of artificial intelligence. So the sophistication and power of the insights that we can derive from these data to be able to be more proactive in how we manage care, preventative in early identification and kind of risk management, but also taking a really personalized approach to care. So if you think of an example for insomnia, for example, where it's a problem where we're never going to have enough clinicians to be able to tackle this, and digital is really the future to be able to have that individual link to patients in every home. But it allows us through things like wearables, so tracking your sleep data on your smartwatch, for example, to really kind of identify exactly what's the issue that individuals are facing. So for people who have the same diagnosis for insomnia, you might have someone who has difficulty falling asleep, others who have difficulty staying asleep. But through the power of data, we can really understand what that is and target the interventions to be able to manage this in a more effective way.
Thank you, Laura. Daniel?
There's a lot of really good comments in both of what you said, and I agree with your perspectives on this. But I wanted to just kind of introduce a different way or I should say, a different aspect of digital therapeutics. First of all, they work. I want to be very clear about digital therapeutics. If developed right and clinically validated correctly, they work. And when they're delivered to a patient, they have an immense impact on the quality of care for that patient. WellDoc is an amazing example. Not only did they have the diabetes care, but they've morphed their business over the past years into something that really I look at them as the prototype for what the future of digital therapeutics are going to look like. Here's basically the core. Traditionally, digital therapeutic companies, at least in my observation, have been siloed. They've had to develop their core module that is the therapeutic, that does the magic, if you would. But then they have to develop an immense amount of infrastructure to be able to deliver that core magic to the patient or to the clinician. And this costs a lot of money, it takes a lot of time, and it has a significant amount of regulatory overhead to be able to put this in a package and give this to the people who need it. But then, once they're done, they lack distribution. So you have a number of different barriers of well-meaning companies with very effective digital therapeutics from getting to the market and really being able to benefit those who they've targeted. Now I see, or basically this is where I see the future of it. When you have companies like WellDoc that don't just have one, but they have about 6 or 7 different digital therapeutics, each one is a single module, a small SAMD or software as a medical device, which can get approved through the FDA or getting its CE mark much more effectively if it's a small app that plugs into a larger system. And so the future of digital therapeutics isn't about building more silos, but it's about building smaller, more discrete applications that could be deployed in an environment like WellDoc so that it could achieve greater distribution and have a greater effect without those companies having to take on the burden of distribution, infrastructure, regulatory overhead, and then convincing payers of the value of their impact. Furthermore, then they can work in conjunction with others to have a much greater impact on the value. And I think, Laura, you could speak more about the importance of value-based care and how digital therapeutics can tie into that.
I think to follow up as well about the point of fragmentation, and I know we were going to speak a little bit about challenges, but from a payer's perspective, this is one of the key barriers that we see, is that with the different apps and technologies out there, there's a multitude of individual point solutions which exist, which are great for the kind of domain specificity and the depth of knowledge and capabilities which exist. But being able to integrate them within a holistic care pathway is really difficult. And some of the barriers that we see and challenges we encounter is very much on the clinical engagement side, so being able to effectively integrate these within clinical workflows, so there's an end-to-end pathway which is both physical and digital. So we basically don't see these solutions as tacked onto the side of insurance products or solutions which run in parallel to your treating doctor's processes.
Great, thank you, Daniel and Laura. So I think I'll skip the formal question on the challenges that we see because we've kind of touched on them and alluded to them. Laura, you did mention, and Daniel both, the concept of value-based care. Can I ask you to expand a little bit on that, Laura, and from your perspective, how you see these therapeutics contributing towards value-based care agendas and how companies, digital health companies, can support this?
Sure. So value-based care at its core is the principle of quality over quantity of care. So essentially taking a view of how we drive better outcomes rather than just focusing on the activity or volume of care that's provided. And this is about a focus on how we can provide better care to individuals and consideration of their entire patient journey, improvement of population health as a whole. And we know that when you do these things, when people are healthier for longer and they're supported in their journeys back to wellness, we can reduce the overall cost of care and the burden of disease for both public and private payers. So taking these principles, value-based care is very much around kind of taking a data-driven approach to outcomes. And the first and foremost is you need the right information to be able to actually measure and assess the impact of these types of services in terms of clinical outcomes, experience, and the care that's being delivered. And digital therapeutics can play a key role here. By their nature, they're very highly measurable through data and technology. So we're very easily able to demonstrate the impact that these types of solutions have for patients and the outcomes in terms of quality of life, return to wellness, and kind of physical functioning, etc. So in terms of the future of digital therapeutics, I think the real challenge is being able to effectively tell the story of how this has value both on a clinical, customer and commercial perspective. But also one of the challenges is how we then kind of incentivize and pay for that. So it also links into some of the challenges I think we've touched on already, that the reimbursement models really just aren't fit for purpose for the new technologies. And the same with some of the regulatory and kind of assessment frameworks we see. They just haven't kept pace with technology.
Great, thank you. So, Sandeep, Laura has touched on, or spoken a bit about value-based care and measuring patient outcomes. You're a clinician. You have an extensive background in digital health innovation, especially in areas that enhance patient outcomes. Could you share a little bit about what you believe the advancements you've found most effective at improving patient outcomes, and how do you measure success in this space?
Well, in the U.S., it's based on, speaking from the perspective of what is needed in that market, which is quality measures that are defined primarily by Centers for Medical Care, like CMS, right? So they define quality measures that they deemed were key drivers to improve the cost of delivery of care. So things like readmissions, impact on some of the chronic conditions that have on social determinants that have on managing chronic conditions. So CMS, the quintuple aim, which defines what those are. So when we build our solutions, you have to, like the first example was the regulatory landscape around helping hospitals manage the risk for withholdment of payment when patients were readmitted within 30 days of being sent home. So that's a clear value proposition that if you can define a solution that can manage that risk for readmission, it has a big impact on the quality of the patient care, but there's a financial impact to the facilities that can deliver the right kind of models. So that was the first area where, this was like 10 years ago, that was like the first clearly defined value proposition that if you built a digital solution to tackle that problem, there was an ROI financially, clinically, and in terms of the quality of care that doctors could provide and that patients were expected to receive. It met all of those criteria for how a digital intervention could have a clear impact on both the cost of care and the quality of care. Now, since then, a lot of things have moved the needle to further define what are some of the ways to measure these digital tools in a real time. So, for example, beyond the chronic conditions like CHF, COPD, you just mentioned sleep apnea. So these tools have now evolved where they're likely, through the right algorithms, can enable the clinical decision without the intervention of a clinician in the loop. So these models that require higher rigor in terms of proving the effectiveness, in terms of safety and efficacy, are self-contained. So the FDA created a new pathway that, as long as you're defining the endpoints just like you would for a clinical trial from a pharmaceutical perspective, so the way you measure the ROI and outcomes is no longer defined by like CMS, but it's just like you would define for a pharmaceutical definition. So it's an evolving process, I think, and it's more and more of these digital tools are showing that real-world evidence, it's a real-time aspect of these digital tools, so you can track how well they're performing. So it gives you another layer of safety.
Great, fascinating. Thank you. I'm sure that there's a lot more that we could all add on that, but I'm aware of time. I'm going to ask you one more quick question, Sandeep, just to focus on the hospital at home or the care at home model, in which you've had a lot of expertise. Very briefly, looking forward, do you think that there are specific technologies or strategies that you think will be game changers for making an at-home care a central and more central and significant part of healthcare delivery?
No, absolutely. I mean, it comes down to resources and the shortages of actually bed capacity in the U.S. and globally. So directionally, more and more care is actually shifting to the home, not just post-acute, but actually acute care as well. And during COVID, a lot of models globally were shown to effectively deliver high-quality acute care at a lower cost with better outcomes. And there was a study that was actually published by David Levine and the team at Brigham that was used to establish a special waiver program in the US through Medicare that allowed hospitals to get reimbursed at the same level for acute care in the home as well as in the hospital. And then these models actually have been adopted more widely outside the US prior to COVID, but COVID accelerated the acceptance of these models, both from the patient side and on the clinician side, that now they understand that you can do this with the right systems in place, a layer of technology and a layer of services, again, with some automation, with some AI algorithms to scale access to limited resources so that patients can receive that care in the home. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Interesting. Daniel, we have a few more minutes. You obviously have significant expertise on advising startups and companies on go-to-market execution for digital health products. When it comes to these executions, what are some of the common pitfalls you've seen companies encounter? I know you've touched on the siloed approach, but perhaps you can expand a little bit more. And if there are specific strategies that have proven effective for early stage companies in gaining market traction, perhaps you could just talk a little bit more to that.
Okay, with the short amount of time we have left, I'm going to try to be as succinct as I can. The main challenge for many digital health companies is a lack of distribution, and it's also been a prematurity to the market. The market wasn't ready for digital health companies, but due to this major change in the U.S., which is a move from facility-based centralized care to personalized care in the home, which I'm a huge advocate of. It works. The data is overwhelming on that. In this new environment, there are going to be new distribution channels where you're going to have companies like Medically Home and various other suppliers that are selling to hospital systems to provide this in-home care level of service. They're going to need digital tools. They're going to need digital therapeutics. They're going to need diagnostics and monitoring. They're going to build out the cloud platform or contract with that. These cloud platforms is the distribution channel for digital health companies in the future. And a digital health company really needs to work towards that future and not be stuck in today building another silo.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else want to have, are there any responses to Daniel's comments?
No, that's absolutely true. Like, all of the points. So let me just go back. When COVID happened, everybody was just trying to grasp at straws to put something in place quickly to manage the overwhelming demand for virtual or remote care. And now, post-COVID, a lot of these systems are taking a step back and looking at where can we plug these into a platform approach where, to your point about distribution, it's easier to become part of for example, there's a company called Zelt in the US that makes it easy to deploy applications that are essentially to a digital formulary that hospitals can create. So even health plans have now validated digital formularies so that their members can have access to tools. So these are great distribution channels for you to plug your solution into.
Absolutely. So, unfortunately, I'm looking at the clock and I'm aware of time, and we've reached the end of our discussion. So I would like to ask you all, we've touched on a few comments about the future of digital health, but formally I'd like to ask each of you, over the next 5 to 10 years, or 5 to 10 years down the line, what do each of you envision as the future of digital therapeutics? Are there specific technologies or regulatory changes, which is a big topic that we didn't quite get to, or patient care models that you think will play a defining role? 5 seconds each
For me, I think it's going to be more on the consumerization. There's a big payer segment in the U.S. that is not tapped into, which is the consumer, because the cost of copays and et cetera is getting to the point now where if you can create a really valuable tool, the patients could self-fund. That's going to be a great access point for these tools to deploy. And because of the automation, patients can get the benefit at a lower cost.
Thanks, Sandeep. Laura?
And to build, I guess, from a payer's perspective and more specifically from health insurance view, it's seen as a viable model that we can then start to focus on things like chronic disease, which is historically...
Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Daniel's got 1 second to give his thoughts.
Early interventions with digital therapeutics will make a big difference on the long-term value of care.
There we go. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.